So thanks for coming in. So today's parent coffee is we're starting to look at the high schools. We have one parent coffee scheduled. This one, which is focused on the academics, and then after April vacation, we have a parent coffee that's looking at the co-curricular programs, both on the sort of activities and sports side, as well as the spiritual opportunities that your son will have when they're in the high school. I do want to just emphasize that although we're starting to look at the high school, this is not the end of 8th grade today. There's still quite a bit left to do. And a lot of fun things coming up for them. And we have our community service day coming up. Many of your sons are going on the DC trip in April. We have the 8th grade video that they do in the spring, a lot of big projects and stuff. And then we don't have a sort of graduation ceremony in the division. One graduation from BCI. And that'll be long enough for all of you, 4 years from now. So we do, at the end of the year in the 8th grade, we do have a closing assembly. It's just for the students and faculty. It's fun, it's upbeat, it's more appropriate to where they are than having a drawn-out graduation ceremony. So many of you may have neighbors, friends, whose sons have just been accepted to BC High. Originally, this parent coffee was planned for 2 weeks ago. It was the same week as the accepted students reception for the incoming 9th graders for next year. And so those parents are probably getting a lot of information right now from the admissions office. I feel that this is probably a better way to target our information specifically to a lot of you who know a lot more about the school than someone who's coming in new in 9th grade. So again, we have these 2 parent copies. There are, just like when your son was accepted to come into 7th grade, or for some of you 8th grade, you're probably directed to the website to the new student information. And on the public page, not the portal, but the public page, bci.edu/new student, you can find stuff that's about information for all students. Much of that you already know, but also information particularly for this high school. Again, some of that you already know, some of it's more specific. But today we're going to talk about the academic program. 3 sort of key people on the academic side of the high school. One is Charlie Drain, who's our academic vice principal, who had planned to be here today. He's at a funeral, so he won't be here today. But again, a good person for you all to get to know. The other is the academic dean, is Tom Smith. Tom does all the scheduling classes. He will talk with your sons a week from Monday to talk about the course selection process for next year. And also, Kim Smith. Kim Smith is our vice principal for curriculum and professional development. Kim's also been academic dean at one point in time, so Kim's going to do the presentation today. I will sit down Charlie and Kim and Tom at some point in time over the summer. Tracy will sit down with the guidance department at some point in time over the summer and sort of hand off your sons and give them sort of information we feel that's good for them to know as they work with your sons over the next 4 years. And if you have particular concerns about your sons going into the high school, certainly you can wait until the end of the summer when you find out who his guidance counselor will be and try to make an appointment to see guidance counselor. Sometimes it's good to try to get an appointment with Charlie Drain over the summer or Kim over the summer, and just to sort of, again, if you have those particular concerns. I'm going to turn it over to Kim, who's going to do the presentation. Do you want the lights there a little bit?
Actually, it's all right, but we'll see as it goes. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming. It's nice to see you all here. My job primarily today is to make sure if you have any questions about the transitions academically, that I'm going to answer them. So I have some information that I'm hoping sort of answers questions you might already have in your mind or might not know that you might have in your mind. And then at the end, I want to open it up so if you have any questions or understandings about how your son is going to transition from 8th to 9th grade. That's what we're really here for today. So welcome. Our goal is to talk a little bit about how well we think we've prepared your sons for the high school. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to notice that are going to be different and to prepare you for those differences. Homework load is going to change a little bit. The way that we have your son develop his self-advocacy skills changes a little bit because our structure is a little bit different. We're a little bit bigger than the middle school. And so we want to help him navigate kind of a bigger space. We're going to talk a little bit about the course offerings and the course selection process that we're in the beginnings of to prepare for his first year in high school. and then I'll just open it up for questions. So a little bit about the Arupe student preparedness. Now we have historical data, now that we've been around for 11 years, to say that we are really pleased with how successful our students transition from 8th grade into 9th grade, and from Arupe into the entirety of high school. We feel that our students are very well prepared, content-wise, and study skills-wise. And so we like to say that now because not to pat Bob on the back, but because the 2 years that your son has spent in Arupe, we have found has been a really important and helpful way to get him to do well in high school. Some of the ways that he's also been prepared are a little bit softer, so there's not data, even though we have 11 years around it, but we know that your sons feel comfortable because we use the same language. The Jesuit terminology is some of it, but the expectations, our values, the way we assert them, the way we ask them to be men for others, but also ask them to be young men, sort of taking care of themselves, and that's advocacy. But there's a lot of terminology and language that keeps them comfortable. And that comfort, I think, also extends that they're comfortable in the building. The cafeteria is not overwhelming and intimidating for them, right? Getting and understanding where the library doors are, coming in different directions, those kind of little things, knowing how to pronounce McElroy, like little tiny things like that, right? Give them a sense of comfort that when they come in, they have a little less jitters in August than what our incoming students do. And in fact, we try to maximize on that a little bit and helping them to help the new guys feel comfortable coming in too. And so that idea that they are leaders in the 9th grade class from the get-go, I think is really important. They make up about half of the 9th grade class. And so it's really important that they know that they are kind of responsible for the welcoming force that we try to offer to all of our students. But their comfort, I think, sort of helps. A little bit about homework comparisons. There is an increase, an uptick in homework comparisons. Homework loads that we do, both in terms of the type of homework that your sons will experience and the quantity of it. Now, this is something the Academic Council, which is made up of all of the department chairs in each of the departments, we have ongoing discussions about what is our workload, what should our workload be, how good is it, how much of it is helping the students learn, where is that stress point. There's a lot of research now coming out that we're trying to stay on top of to be aware of that. But as of right now, the amount of homework every high school student can anticipate is about 3 hours a night. And that's a lot. We find that they do a lot of it if your son commutes, if he's on the train. A lot of it's not on the train, just like maybe now. It's sometimes done during a free period, because every freshman will have about one free period every other day. During lunch is very popular for me to get some homework done. But then that after school time or after sport time, there is usually a pretty good chunk of homework. So you should expect, and he should expect, an increase in the amount of homework. And then type of homework changes, we think, a little bit too. There's a lot more reading focus, especially in classes like biology and religion, which you'll notice biology in the high school is a very reading heavy, and the science in the 7th and 8th grade is much more experiential or lab oriented. So that sort of explains too some of that. So if your son's reading is something that he's not a big fan of, you might notice that 3 hours feels a little weightier at first. That transition could be a little bit tough. Also in the high school, just in terms of differences, is the religion classes all year. So it meets every day, like English and biology and math, for the whole of the year. So unlike in middle school right now where it's first semester. And the other piece besides sort of that weight of homework, it comes hand in hand with our hope that what they're also learning is a different form or a kind of a step up in their self-advocacy. And so the idea of how they find extra help in a bigger environment where their teachers aren't assigned to a classroom like they are now. Instead they have offices and they might be in different classrooms, and where your son has his math's not a great example because all the math classes are near each other, but where he has his English class might be really far away from where he'll find his English teacher. So navigating how to find extra help and helping your son figure out where that is, it's on us. We have our senior mentors working with them a lot. But it is also a tricky time, that first month where they're not quite sure because they have that comfort. I understand where the buildings are, I understand the language, but I don't really know how to get extra help now. It's kind of hard for them at first. And so we really think of it as a tiered approach. We really hope that the student first tries to find a teacher, then he tries to find the guidance counselor, and then if that doesn't work, we ask parents to help and step in. And so I think sometimes the transition for parents is a really hard one to not step in earlier than that. Especially because you know there's going to be a test on Thursday and he doesn't know how to find extra help. I'm just going to call the teacher real quick before he can find her. We encourage you to try to avoid that sort of stressful desire to get involved and help him find a way to get that help first. So that's one of the pieces. that we work on, especially around when there are problems, if he's struggling, if he's worried about an upcoming test. The support systems we think are strong. They're different, so the structures of them are a little bit different. And so your son will be assigned a guidance counselor, and will have that guidance counselor for 4 years, much like he's had the same guidance counselor in our faith for 2 years. And he'll follow that guidance counselor through. And the idea is that's for support, but it's also for college preparation. And so that person's job is to help make sure he's engaged and up with us in our school for the 4 years he's in high school. And along the way, he or she will be collecting that information to be able to write a really good college rep to help you and your son figure out what would be really good matches for college. We also have, it's not quite an equivalent of the advisory program in Aruba that you've seen, but it's somewhat the same. Just about every Monday, your son will be assigned to a small group for his first 2 years. And we meet, we do a variety of programming, somewhat like the advisory that's done in middle school. The major difference being that the advisor doesn't know your son as well as guidance counselor does. So we like to let parents know that difference, that your point of contact first, if you have concern in a specific class, is that teacher, and then if you have concerns about your son as a whole, is his guidance counselor. So just so you understand how to navigate the way that we function, that guidance counselor is really a good contact person. Sometimes we like to put a bullet for parental involvement because our job in 9th grade and 10th grade is to help you separate a little bit, but that doesn't mean that we don't want you involved. So we just want to make sure that you understand that as we sort of help together, help him become a little bit more engaged or self-advocate, self-aware and self-possessed, it doesn't mean that we don't want you involved. It just means we want to work with you and how to make sure he's kind of at the center of his academic. And so just to give you an overall sense, I know this print is really fine and I can't read it really that well myself, so I don't know how you're doing with it, but there's a lot of information, there's a lot of classes that we're going to be asking you to take in the next 4 years. And in 9th and 10th grade, and even 11th grade, there's not that much room for choice. And so the places where there are choice, we feel like it's really important to help him make that choice. So we're going to talk a little bit in 9th grade about where those choices are and how you might help to make it. But just to give you a sense of what your son will be learning next year, Intro to Christian Thought is the religion class that we'll be taking for the whole year. English 1. He will take one of likely 3, though there's a few kids who might take a more advanced math, but either Algebra 1 Geometry or Algebra 2. He'll take Global History 1 in the Social Studies department. He'll take a language of his choice. Our language requirements for graduation are 3 years of the same language. So it's important, this is one of the places we'll talk a little bit about the choice he has. It's important he makes that choice for a language that he's interested in because it's a 3-year commitment. It could be a rough draft. You can start from scratch and say, absolutely, I made a wrong choice going into 9th grade and change it in 10th grade, but that sort of limits his other electives in senior year. So it's important that he makes a good choice around language. He takes biology for a full year. He takes a health and wellness component, which makes up about 1/4 of a credit, and so the amount of time that takes is it's not a everyday sort of class. He meets with his guidance counselor for 1 semester in a small group, once a cycle, and then he takes the fine arts class, which it's complicated, so we're going to get to that with lots of graphs and charts. So those are the classes we'll be taking in 9th grade. This just makes me laugh. I just put this up here to prove to you that we're really smart and we understand how the math curriculum works here. But what this is doing here is it's showing you that no matter which of the 3 math classes he's placed in his freshman year, he can make it to calculus by his senior year. So even if he's placed in Algebra 1, sometimes parents have expressed concern that what does that mean about him being able to get to calculus, which is really important. If he starts in Algebra 1, you'll notice at the top, he still has the ability not just to get to a calculus class, but to get to an AP calculus class if he chooses to take it. And then if he starts in pre-algebra, he can in 8th grade. I'm sorry, this is the middle one, I did it backwards. So if he starts in 9th grade in Algebra 1, he can still get to AP calculus if he wants to. It's still a possibility in terms of his 4-year pathway. If he starts in geometry or geometry honors, either way, he can get into AP Calculus or the second, so AP Calculus AB is the first semester college level course, AP Calculus BC is the second semester college level course. If he starts in geometry or geometry honors next year, either one, he can get to either one of those calc classes by his senior year. And if he starts with if he's placed in geometry honors, if he's in geometry honors now and he's placed in either the algebra 2 trig honors or algebra 2, the highest level of calculus he'll get to is multivariable calculus. We're also going to post this PowerPoint online so you can take a look at the different pathways later if you'd like to. But this is, it looks complicated, but all it's saying is no matter what his math placement is for next year, he can still get into an advanced level or college level math by his senior year. So all of that sort of graphic information, and this is the course selection form that we're going to ask your son to complete. Tom Smith, the academic dean, will meet with him in about a week and a half, and we usually have that due about 2 weeks later, so it'll probably be due April 6th, I think, but it'll be due before April vacation. And so what this does, this is the place where he can make some choices. And so this is a really good place for that sort of self-advocacy, sitting down with him and saying, okay, here are the choices that you can make. What do you want to do? What are the places that you can choose study? What do you want it to be? And that first choice comes with fine arts. And so fine arts can be musical. It can be sort of an intense focus on an art that he already feels he has a skill in and wants to develop. Or it can be sort of this broadband quarter credit class where it's like, hey, I'm not really sure I'm interested in something, or I'd like to learn a little bit about a field of art that I haven't really explored before. The differences in these classes are kind of time commitment, content specific, and time of day. So time commitment in terms of amount of time spent and the time of day. So the bands, concert choir, and liturgical musicians fulfill a fine arts requirement. Those usually happen before or after the school day. And so depending on his transport, depending on whether he's a morning person or not, depending on if he's going to do sports, those are pieces that end up impacting his ability or desire to do those programs. The second one is visual foundations, theater foundations, or sculpture studio. Visual foundations is visual arts. It's mostly drawing and painting. Theater foundations is theater arts, acting and backstage combined. And sculpture studio, we just got, what are they called, Wheel and the Kiln. And so it's kind of exciting, the sculpture studio one. The reason those are separate from others is that they're semester classes, or they're half of a credit. In order to graduate, he needs 1 complete credit in fine art. And so if he completes a half credit his freshman year, he's halfway done with his graduation requirement in fine arts. What it does mean, and this is crucially important to his choice too, is that he has less free periods. And that's something that he's going to probably keep in his formula of sort of decision making that you might want to help him navigate through. The quarter credit classes at the bottom, there's a large array. They meet 3 times a cycle during his fine arts semester, which is second semester. So they meet 3 times a cycle. The middle group meets 6 of the 7 days. There's a day that drops, so it meets twice as often, and it's worth twice as much.
Take the middle bit for a second. Visual foundations, theater foundations, sculpture studio. Your son's really into art or drama. That he's probably going to, Ms. Myers may recommend him, say, hey, you should really think about visual foundations. You love art, you do really well in it, you can take it, and that's a great one. And again, for those guys who are really going to take more art courses, visual art courses in high school, that's a great one. Some of you guys are already really into the theater. They've done shows both years. They may want to do that. That's a great opportunity. A lot of guys will hear about, because we put, we have 150 kids in the high school choir. So a lot of guys know about that. They've heard about it. Their older brothers take it, their friends' older brothers take it.
So kids like it. They go to a lot of different countries.
They're going to Rome this year.
They're going to
vacation.
Rome so yeah.
Are you going to talk about those when they meet, or?
Those, yeah. So those are the ones that sort of there are some conflicts. The choir, concert choir, and liturgical musicians are both before school starts. So if it's feasible for your son to get here for a 7:30 start time, a 7 for some concert choir, but a 7:30 start time for liturgical musicians, then that's a good way for him to, and he likes to sing, that's a great way for him to keep his free periods, which is important to him, to sing and to performing arts, which is important to us. And it depends on your kind of transportation schedule, really. The bands meet after school. And that one tends to be trickiest for kids who do sports, but it doesn't have to eliminate. We do have some students who do both. If your son plans on being a 3-season athlete, that's probably the only situation in which he can't do both the band and 3 sports, because they need to have a consistent presence with the band, just like they do on a sports team. But those are the ones that involve instruments are after school. The ones that involve the instrument with their voice is before school. Is an easy way to kind of remember that spec. The other thing too, and again, because we're in collaboration or cahoots, depending on who's saying it, that you might want to talk to your sons about, if they're good in art, if they're interested in theater, these are great classes. And if their argument to you to not want to choose it is that they want free periods, is you can remind them that they'll get those free periods back when they're older. So they'll have free periods again later, they just won't have them this year. I'm only giving you that as sort of ammunition to use if that ends up being sort of a discussion that you have in your students.
Kim, I'll share one thing about fine art. So as opposed to all other parts so far of high school transition, these are the conversations I've had the most with your sons. So some auditions for different groups have already begun, or they just have questions about it. It's what they hear about, and they're very interested in free periods in the high school, and they want to know how to game the system. So a lot of them have already come to talk to me about it, and certainly if they have questions about that, once they have the presentation with Mr. Smith, they can come to me and ask more questions. I'll go through the course selections with them and look at the different fine art options and find something that works for them. So just so you know, a lot of them have already begun to think about fine arts.
If I can interject quickly about free periods. We've been having a lot of conversations with some of the boys this year because they have a free flex period 4 times a cycle. Similar to free period, they have options. Most of our guys just want to get their homework done. They go to study hall, they get their homework done, rather than taking advantage of some of the opportunities that I think are much more enriching for them. But we want to let them have that choice. So a lot of times what the conversation we're trying to have with them is, okay, what are you getting out of getting that homework done in that 40 minutes? What would you be doing with that 40 minutes in the afternoon? If it's just sitting on your couch, maybe you should take advantage of more opportunities, like a visual foundations course or something like that. If it is you are so busy when you get home and you're having trouble getting all your homework done, then yeah, that is a different reason. But I think getting them to really think about what the choice they're making, that's my best advice to you, if they're talking about whether they want more free periods or not, get them to balance it. What do they need that free period for?
So once you get through the really heavy stuff of choosing the right fine arts class, which is probably literally the biggest decision that they make coming in, it's a question of language. And like I mentioned before, this is an important question to grapple with. If your son's been studying the language and wants to keep at it, that's great. That's awesome. He might be able to, get further and take a college level course maybe earlier because he's already had the 2-year start. So if he likes it, have him say the same language. That's fantastic. This is also a time he might want to try something new. Maybe he's been with the same language for 2 years and it's kind of okay, but he's heard other things that he'd like to change languages. That's good, but remind him that this is a 3-year commitment, which for boys your son's age is not anything that they can actually understand. But to help talk them through that this is something that's going to last a long time. It can't just be because this week he got a bad quiz grade in the language class he's in, which sometimes kind of affects their decision making.
3 years in the high school, we've had some confusion over this in the past. Even if they start at level 2, they still have to take 3 years in the high school. That's for college transcripts. Colleges want to see that 3 years on a high school transcript. They don't see the 7th and 8th grade transcript.
And he can take language for 4 years. We don't limit him to 3, but the requirement is 3 years starting in 9th grade. So we offer Chinese, French, Latin, and Spanish. And if he would like to be considered for level 2 honors of the language he's been taking, because he's staying with the same language, we just want to make sure that you check that here so that we make sure that we touch base with his language teacher and we figure out what would be the best place for him. And then the math. You have to apply actually for Spanish, French, and Chinese to be the honors level, but if your son's taking Latin, he just has to say, I'd be interested in. Mr. Russo will make those determinations about application. So for math, that comes from whether if your son has maintained a B+ or higher in his current math class, he's eligible for, with his math teacher's recommendation, getting into the honors of the next step with math. So if he's in Algebra 1 and he's been maintaining an honor B+ or higher over the course of his time in Algebra 1, and his Algebra 1 teacher says, yeah, I think you're ready for geometry honors, I think this would be a good fit for you, then we make the recommendations for math that way. And to be honest, on our end, like Tracy does a lot of work with the fine arts on this end. On our end, we receive most of our calls about math placement, which is why we give you that really complicated chart to begin with, just to let you know that sometimes we feel like if we don't get in it now, I've gotten my son out of the track and he won't be able to be as successful as I want him to be. And it's really not tracked that strongly this way, so we want to make sure you understand that. Our goal is to make sure in his freshman year, he has the strongest foundation in math so that he will be successful in whatever advanced level of math he gets to by his senior year. And so the combination of his grade and his teacher's understanding of how he grapples with and understands math is really informative for us. And we tend to place them well. We tend to find that students sometimes feel a little antsy if they feel like they've been underplaced, but then by the time they get to October, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. This is going to help now. And so please feel free to keep calling us. If you think we misplaced your son, we want to keep that conversation open, and we want to be informed and talk through with you what our thinking is and hear what your thinking is. But just know that a lot goes into it in advance in terms of thinking about them.
So there's a geometry regular course and then a geometry honors.
Yeah. That's right, yep. There's a regular and an honors. And in fact, some students, because if they're doing a level 2 honors in their language and they want to do one of the sort of visual foundations or theater foundations, they might not want another honors course kind of listed for them. And that's also an option, to not heighten everything all of the time. So that's another reason why that's something that we want your input on too, because we might say, oh, he's excellent. And yeah, he is, but he just needs to read and be a kid, so I'd rather not. So last question was about placement being around pacing. So there's a lot of that issue is around sort of the pacing of the class and the speed with which materials covered. That's true, to be honest, both language and math. Any other questions at this point on the courses? Yes, sir.
Why do you go from algebra to geometry back to algebra? Why isn't it continuous flow? That's not an option?
It's not an option. It's a great question. We talked a lot about it a little bit, the academic vice principal, myself and I. There's not really an answer to it. A lot of schools do it this way. They do algebra as a foundation because you need algebra 1 to really do geometry well. And so then if you skip ahead to algebra 2, then kind of miss out on that opportunity to do geometry is the theory that we use. Geometry is a kind of proof-driven, different style of learning math. And so we find that also that in 9th and 10th grade, there's something about that works well at that age level. That's sort of a big answer to your question, but it could be done either way, but that's where it tends to work. And we don't find that because they use the algebra in geometry, we tend that they don't forget it when they get to algebra 2. It's not lost.
The major difference between geometry and geometry honors, some difference in depth. Big difference is the speed. So they do the geometry honors, but in the honors track, they're trying to do geometry, algebra 2, and trig over 2 years. So they do geometry honors, they do all geometry by about April vacation. Start the first 4 chapters of algebra 2, and then algebra 2 honors, they finish algebra 2 and do trig, so they're ready for calculus. So many guys will then do a pre-calc, because maybe they're not quite ready for calculus. Most of them are ready for calculus, they go on to calculus the following year. But that's the primary difference.
Any other questions about math or yes?
Question. So this form comes home to us, is that correct?
Through your son.
Okay, so we fill it out or we
You fill it out together, yeah?
Um,
Because there's both of you, we want both of you to sign it, because we want to make sure you guys have worked on it together.
So if we underplace him together, or we overplace him, then does he meet with Mr. Smith, or does that happen beforehand? Does somebody take a look at this and say no?
Yeah. So it says it has the advisor signature on it, which is true, it'll get handed into the advisor, but the advisors will generally look over them. They all come to me, and then I turn them in. And most of the time, if the advisor has a question like, hey, this guy really underplaced or overplaced himself, can you take a look at it? And then I'll go talk to that, whether it's Spanish, Latin, French teacher, or the math teacher that they have, and just try to assess before we get to the end of the year where we are. For some of the kids, it goes all the way till the end. Like the teacher's like, I want to see how he does on his Spanish placement test. So they'll take a test at the end of Spanish class, and Miss Riley might say, it's grades have been pretty good. I just want to see how he does. Because they have to do like a writing component. So some of them, it goes till about the end, and then we sort of relook at it, but I'll be going through all the forms, so.
Great question. Other questions? Yeah.
Is the math teacher going to suggest or recommend the student before they get this? You know, to the student,
it happens
should-
kind
Those recommendations will come later. So
Yeah.
what they're gonna do is just say, as it says, sorry, I don't know if you read, if, currently taking out one, do you want to be considered for geometry honors? If he's a really good student and he checks that no, probably the advisor is gonna check to say, "Hey, what are you thinking about this?" Sometimes we'll call home and say, "Are you sure?" Because, hey, the math teacher's saying he should be in the honors next year. Everything we can see should be in the honors. What's the other piece? He might say, well, you know what, he is, doing 4 hours a day of equestrian next year, and we just know he's gonna be so swamped with out-of-school commitment, that's why we want to slow it down. Whatever, so there might be, usually, most kids will check yes. They think, and they should, and if he has a question, he can always ask his math teacher. Particularly if he's one of the bubble kids, like he's a B plus, right on, he's had maybe a B, then he went up to a B plus, he says, what do you think? And feel free to have that conversation with the math teacher.
I love your question too, because it allows us to say, we want them to do self-advocacy, but we're still kind of paying attention and don't take their word always as the final one. Do you know what I mean? So we have them fill this out with you, but we also have some pretty good expertise in the building about where we think they should be. And so when that doesn't match, that's when we kind of try to have conversations or sort things out. And a lot of times we'll sit down with them and we'll explain to them what our thinking is. The student gets a 0.5 bump on their grade if it's an honors and a full bump on their grade if it's an AP for later. We do know that college admissions like to tally the honors and APs, but one of the things they look for is pattern of growth. And so what we've noticed is that if your son takes 3 honors in freshman year and then an AP and 2 honors in sophomore year and then 2 APs and then 3 or 4 APs, that pattern is what they're looking for rather than the tally. So if it's 1 honors in freshman year and it still grows the same. It's that pattern that is helpful. We're also, I think, in it right now in a culture where we're all working to understand stress and how stress helps. And our job is not to help them feel more stressful. Our job is to help figure out what's best for them, what's manageable and what's good. And sometimes too, talking to them now about college admissions tends to add to that. So we really try to focus on, okay, what can you manage for next year? What's going to be good for you? How are you going to learn well next year? And hopefully, with attentive, I mean, in 4 years it's going to, sorry to say this, happen really fast. So all of a sudden it's going to be upon us. So we have to be attentive to each step, and we are, I think, with the help of our guidance department, very aware of what needs to be done. But we try really hard to work with you to help the kids not feel the stresses that come with that as much. Enough about language? Enough about that? Okay. We already got to questions. Are there any other questions? About academics, about transition, about courses, course selection? Yeah, sorry.
Tell me the schedule for that new level on fine arts.
Yep.
How many hours?
Yep, great question. So the way the schedule works in high school, it's the same as Aruba base in that there's a 7-day cycle. And we rotate through, so the class meets at a different time, and then our class drops once per cycle, which is different from Aruba. So your son will have 6 classes that meets every day for the whole year. And then there are these 3 other, and that leaves one block of the day that rotates through. So on a day 1, it's first period, day 2, it's second period, day 3, it's first period. That's his free period. And what we use his free period for in first semester is one time during those 6 blocks, he meets with his guidance counselor in a small group. And then we're working on this right now, so this might actually change for you guys, but historically about 2 of the other times is used in a health and wellness class. So 3 of the times he's free. And then in second semester, while those 6 classes continue to meet, that free block frees up, and that becomes the time where his fine arts meet. If he does that middle block of fine arts classes, it meets every day. So that would mean that every day of his second semester, he takes that fine arts class during that block. Yeah.
The kid sees similar presentations.
Yep, it's like this, yep.
What does that happen?
That happens on the 26th during
Week from Monday.
a week from Monday with the academic team. So he goes through the same sort of choices, explains the same thing, walks through free periods and why it matters, why they don't. talks about how important it is to talk to their current teachers about where they think they should be placed, to have conversations with them.
And that's when we'll hand him he'll get his form at that point in time. And we'll also probably post it online for when he loses it, you can print it out. And he'll get it, well, we'll give him a couple of weeks or something like that to get filled out. And feel free again to call, once you see it, it's actually nice, usually it's sort of a month between when you hear this presentation and when we get to that. This time it's going to be a little, it's going to be quicker window. But feel free to call, you can talk to the advisor, you can talk to Tracy, you can talk to me. We've done this many times now, so happy to sort of help out. Again, not a whole lot of decisions, only 2 places where you could possibly be in honors next year, that's math and language. A lot of choices involved in the arts. For some, that's an easy choice. If you really don't like art at all, I'll do one of the 4 credit classes. This one sounds interesting. For some, it's really easy. Wow, I love art. I'm doing visual foundations. Ms. Meyer says I love it. Great. So and then you got a bunch of guys in this room. Maybe I like singing, maybe I like this. We've even had some kids do both. They do choir in the morning and do a regular art class during the school day. So there are many options for them. They'll find something that will fit. There is one question Kim skipped on the first page. The first question it says, check this box if you are not planning to come to 9th grade at PC High. About 5 kids check that wrong every year. Why'd you come to that?
Panic.
But that just helps us, again, you don't have to fill out if he's definitely not coming, you don't have to fill out the rest of the form. You don't have to fill out that for music class or art class or anything. Just check the box and we're done. If you're not sure, because a lot of parents are still trying to figure it out, that's fine, just fill it all out. You can always tell us later. But if you know now, it's a little helpful as they start to run the schedule, not to schedule a kid who definitely won't be here next year. If you're not sure, we'll schedule. Because a lot of people make that decision for us.
Did you have a question?
What does summer prep look like?
At incoming, there's a summer reading assignment. There's an all-school read like you guys have done before. I think high school usually assesses it in the English department, but that kind of rotates sometimes. So there's an all-school read, and then the English department assigns a book to incoming freshmen. Those choices are made, but we try to make them before the kids leave, but early June, at the latest, is when that goes out. Yeah.
It sounds like there's a dedicated period for the first part of the year for them to do their guidance, and then that goes to the second year. How do they meet with their guidance meetings?
They schedule an appointment. So that's the time. So one of the reasons we like to have them is they become comfortable, they know them by name, they know where their office is. And so in second semester, if they have a need, they can go, they can walk in, or the kids set up an appointment to meet with them. But that small group only meets. It meets once a year for a semester. So for freshmen, it's first semester. For sophomores, it's second semester. For juniors, it's second semester. And for seniors, it's first semester. Yeah.
You had mentioned at the beginning of the boys here in college.
Yeah, it's like August 31st. Sorry, September.
Oh, so
There's an orientation day.
okay,
It's not the end of the world. I think we'll all live through it, I'm thinking, but it's definitely something, there are things that we do at that in terms of, it's a good day to be there because it's like, they see everyone and get into their small groups and meet their senior mentors. I haven't actually looked at the calendar recently beyond tomorrow, so I don't know what the dates are, but it's the Thursday before Labor Day. It's the day that we normally have our freshman when we transfer student orientation. But by then you'll know who the guidance counselor is, so reach out to the guidance counselor. Yeah,
If I understand, there's no class ranking in high school?
that's correct.
Okay, and so I'm still, I know 4 years is going to be here before I never thinking in terms of college.
Yeah.
So how do they know, I'm sure the guidance counselor helps kind of show them where they need to be and the difference between honors and AP.
Yep.
And, because MIT, you're going to be the top 2% of your class.
That's right.
How do you know if you're the top 2% of your class?
You don't, which is why it's important that they, make sure that they're talking to their guidance counselor about the number of honors and APs. We don't report rankings to school. I think the only time we break that is for academies, so for the Naval Academy and Air Force we will. But they don't know. So again, it comes down to that idea: are you doing well? Are you doing the best that you can? What are the grades that you're making?
I don't know, do colleges recognize that? And
Yep.
say, okay, we
Yeah,
know
they're
they're
fine
from
with
BC
it.
and
Yes.
they've got a 3, not.
Yep.
Okay.
One thing that is different is they'll have a GPA in So in a Roubaix, there's no GPA on your report card. There is a GPA on your high school. I don't think there, maybe there is on the final report card, but like right now with the standards and whatnot, it's very confusing. In a Roubaix, there's a more consistent GPA, and Kim was mentioning like the bump for honors and for APs, so that will help sort of guide the conversation more in high school.
And the guidance department in the high school uses Naviance, which has this really incredible graphic thing where we keep inputting those GPAs into Naviance, and you can look college by college and it cluster graphs it for you. So your son's GPA will appear in the cluster graph where historically students at that school, what their GPA was and which ones were accepted and which weren't. And so that it's a way of it's a really interesting. Naviance is a pretty incredible software that we use to help prepare them to figure out which colleges. And so there's data in there that I think you'll find helpful in terms of feeling like you have zero idea. And their lunchtime conversations tend to sort of sort it out too, because they have the GPAs. They kind of do the work. We just don't do it for them.
Is there any administration of a PSAT early on or any
Yeah.
other standardized testing that factors into these assessments?
Yeah, so we do PSATs sophomore year and the practice ACTs junior year, because the ACTs has become mandatory at some of the schools that our students tend to gear towards. So we give them a practice of each. The National Merit Scholar is based on the PSAT rather than the ACT. So students who we think might do really well in that, we have them do the PSAT again. So those are the preps, and then we offer for no charge an SAT prep course or ACT prep course for students. So those are things that in a couple of years you'll be getting in the Eagle update from us about how to make sure your son goes to that. Those we find, studies show that doing those courses, finishing those courses within 2 weeks of the test date is helpful. So making plans around whether he does that in the summer or the fall, depending on which test date he ends up choosing, will be something that you want to keep in mind. Which reminds me, you guys get the Ruby update on Fridays. The Eagle update comes out on Thursdays. You'll start getting that over the summer. It's a pretty dense amount of information in there. You'll get a few that are geared just towards incoming freshman parents over the summer, and then you'll get the ones that are for the whole of the high school, but all kinds of information. Guidance sends, like, I think there's usually like 7 to 10 pieces of information from guidance every week. So you will get all kinds of information about Naviance and how to use it, and it won't, I promise it won't feel overwhelming by the time we get there. So major takeaways, the guidance counselor is your go-to for all things that sort of centered on your son, which is a little different rather than advisor. Guidance counselor, I mean, I know guidance counselors too, but that's a big one. Course selection is coming up. Try to help your son with this decision-making process, and remember that the fine arts decision is the biggest one that he has, so whatever agency you can give him to make a good choice there would be great. If you have questions, once his suggestions for his placements are made, and then once we make decisions, if you have questions, please reach out to our academic dean, Tom Smith, and any question, whether it's he's underplaced, he's overplaced, you're just not sure, we'd love to make sure that we talk you through to make sure we're all on the same page and he's in the right place when he comes in August or September. Great, thank you so much for coming.